As you read these words, I may no longer be alive. Or perhaps we are sitting in a sterile courtroom, my fate hanging in the balance. My name is Julie Mason, and at the time of writing this, I am 22 years old and a psychology student at the prestigious Columbia University. The beginning of this story takes us back to October 2023, on a chilly evening when I made the familiar walk to nightclub, hoping to find some handsome guy or gorgeous babe to pass the time with. After indulging in a few drinks and brushing off the advances of unwanted suitors, I grew increasingly bored and frustrated. "I can't believe I keep subjecting myself to this cesspool," I exclaimed, gesturing around me at the same dull faces and shitty music. "What a fucking waste of time," a sensual voice whispered in my ear.
"Why do you keep coming then?"
I could feel her hot breath on my skin as she handed me a blood-red drink, her gaze piercing into my soul. "Routine. My mother always said I'm a creature of habit. Moving to New York hasn't changed me," I replied, trying not to succumb to her hypnotic stare. She smiled.
"So you're an outsider? That makes you even more intriguing,"
she said with a soft voice, tracing a finger along the rim of her glass. I couldn't tear my eyes away from hers. I couldn't deny the pull she had on me. "What's your name?" I said, feeling the urgency rise within me. She leaned in closer, her lips brushing against my ear as she whispered her reply.
"Dalia."
I felt captivated and unnerved at the same time. She was exactly the type of person I had been seeking. Just as the situation seemed exciting, a man stepped in. He was tall and built like a professional athlete, his muscles rippling under his shirt. Normally, I might have found him attractive, but at that moment, I couldn't stand the sight of him. He was nothing more than an irritating fly buzzing around me.
"Get lost, moron."
The woman spat venomously, dismissing him with a flick of her hand. We both laughed hard at the loser. I couldn't take my eyes off her as I took a sip of the drink she handed me. Her red lipstick still lingered on the glass, and I couldn't resist the twisted thought of drinking from that exact spot. Her jet black bangs framed her face perfectly, and her leather top barely contained her generously endowed bosoms. "You don't seem to be from around here either," I commented, intrigued by her foreign accent.
"I come from a far-off place. But tell me about yourself. Do you miss your parents now that you've moved to New York?"
"No, I'm an independent girl now. Yay! I only see them during holidays," I replied, finishing the last drop of my blood-red drink.
"Do you have any siblings, a possessive boyfriend?"
Dalia asked with a mischievous smile. "Nope, I'm a lonely girl in this world," I responded, secretly hoping for her to make a move.
"Well, why don't we go have some fun?"
Dalia suggested with a devilish grin. We headed to the dance floor, but as the strobe lights flashed and the bass pounded, I started to feel increasingly lightheaded and disoriented. Dalia grabbed my hand and urged me outside, saying,
"This environment isn't good for you. Let's get some fresh air."
I was hopelessly disoriented at this point. I vaguely recall the bouncer stopping us at the exit, and Dalia whispering something in his ear before we finally emerged into the cold night air. The chill momentarily revived me, but it wasn't long until a heavy lethargy began to consume me once more.
"Keep moving, darling. Get your blood flowing."
Dalia whispered in my ear seductively. We wandered through narrow alleyways, the moon casting a crimson hue upon us. My mind was clouded and I could barely even speak.
"Stay with me, my dear. We're almost there."
Dalia's voice dripped with alluring malice as she led me deeper into the dark unknown. Out of nowhere, I found myself kneeling in front of a sleek black limousine. The doors opened to reveal a group of shadowy figures, their faces hidden behind blood-red robes and grotesque masks. Dalia's voice echoed in the background, but it was distorted and unnatural. They pulled me inside and everything became a blur. My mind was playing tricks on me, distorting reality. They took me to an unknown location and strapped me down onto a cold stone table. I could feel their hands all over me, violating me in ways unimaginable. Their demonic voices filled the air as they chanted ancient incantations. And I think I may have heard Dalia's voice too, but I couldn't be sure. As I slipped into unconsciousness, I realized that this was not just a nightmare. It was a living nightmare crafted by my own twisted mind. I woke up in a daze the next morning, unsure if the events of last night had really happened, or if it was all just a nightmare. My head was heavy and my thoughts were messy, making it hard to piece together what had transpired. I stumbled towards the bathroom, my feet cold on the tiled floor. But when I saw the blood-soaked sink and the razor lying inside, reality came crashing down on me. Had I really done something so terrible? Or was this all just a figment of my imagination? The uncertainty gnawed at me as I tried to make sense of the disturbing scene before me. I noticed my arms were completely covered in bandages, but I couldn't remember why. Panic set in as I cleaned up the mess around me, trying to piece together what had happened. Should I take off the bandages to see the extent of my injuries? Or was it better to remain in denial and avoid facing the truth? My hands shook as I turned on the shower, unsure of what I would find underneath those blood-soaked wraps. My arms throbbed with a terrifying pain as I noticed the numerous cuts crisscrossing over my skin. After stumbling into the shower, I carefully cleaned and bandaged them once again. Exhausted and dizzy, I checked my phone to find a message waiting for me on WhatsApp. My heart sank as I listened the message from Dalia.
Babe, I'm so sorry to have left early last night. It seems you had a bit too much to drink and things got out of hand with that razor. You really scared me, but don't worry, I saved you once again. Call me as soon as you're feeling better, and we'll make plans to meet up. Kisses, Dalia.
I headed to the kitchen, craving a cup of hot chocolate to soothe my nerves. But as I turned on the TV for some background noise, I was met with a news report about a missing girl who was found dead. The details made my stomach churn. Cuts all over her body and completely drained of blood. A familiar feeling eroded me as I couldn't shake off the resemblance to the scars on my own arms. Despite the unsettling news, I still reached out to Dalia, and we agreed to meet again at the club later that night. My stomach was in knots at the thought of seeing Dalia again, a mix of excitement and fear. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was telling the truth. As I aimlessly wandered around the club, my eyes scanned the room until they landed on her. She sat alone at a table, adorned in a stunning red dress that hugged her curves perfectly. A lit cigarette dangled from an aristocratic holder between her fingers, defying the club's strict no-smoking policy. But in this moment, it seemed like no one cared about rules or regulations with someone as alluring as Dalia in their presence. My voice trembled as I greeted her, my nerves tangled in anticipation. Dalia rose from her seat and pulled me into a deep, passionate French kiss. My heart raced with desire.
How are you?
She asked, her eyes focused on me with a mixture of concern and lust. I couldn't help but feel the need to explain myself. It's been tough, being alone in this big city, I stuttered. But Dalia reassured me with a seductive smile.
You're not alone anymore.
She purred, guiding me to sit next to her on the couch. And in that moment, I knew she was right. With her by my side, I felt safe, desired, and alive. The rest of the evening was a blast as we talked and flirted relentlessly. My mind still raced with confusion, trying to make sense of her story about taking care of me during my suicide attempt. But her words were like a soothing balm, erasing any trace of fear or doubt in my mind. I couldn't tell if it was the alcohol's doing or her calming presence, but this time, I felt really happy and comfortable. This time, I wasn't overcome by the drowsiness of the previous night. As the hours passed, Dalia's impatience became palpable. Her eyes were filled with a seductive gleam as she leaned closer to me.
How about we do something a little more thrilling?
She whispered, a sly smirk playing on her lips. My heart raced at the thought. What did you have in mind?
It's a secret. Do you like secrets?
She teased, her voice dripping with sensuality. A shiver ran down my spine, and I couldn't help but laugh, caught up in her alluring aura. Little did she know, I was already intrigued by whatever game she wanted to play. As we stumbled out of the loud, crowded nightclub, I noticed a police detective speaking with the bouncer. He was a super tall dude, dressed in a cool green coat and giving me and Dalia the side-eye. My heart started pounding as I remembered the news reports about a girl found dead without blood. Dalia's behavior suddenly seemed suspicious as she quickly pulled me away and called for a taxi.
The fun starts now,
she said, kissing me passionately. As soon as the taxi pulled up, our hands were all over each other. I couldn't even tell you the route we took, too consumed with Dalia's soft lips and eager touch. As we arrived, the driver slyly offered Huss a free ride, as if he was familiar with Dalia's insatiable cravings. Dalia gave him a sly grin, and I knew this night was just getting started. We stumbled upon a magnificent medieval castle, tucked away in the dense woods. The towering structure loomed over Huss, its ancient stone walls shining under the bright full moon. As we approached, it seemed to emit an otherworldly aura, as if beckoning Huss closer. The gate creaked open with a creepy sound, as if granting us permission to enter its mysterious realm.
Follow me,
Dalia exclaimed, eagerly leading the way. What is this place? I inquired, feeling both curious and a bit apprehensive.
If I tell you, then it won't be a secret anymore,
she replied with a clever smile. We strolled through a regal and meticulously maintained garden, the vibrant colors of blooming flowers catching our eyes at every turn. In the center stood a grand fountain, adorned with intricate sculptures that resembled bats in flight. The sound of bubbling water added to the soothing atmosphere as we made our way to the front door. Dalia paused for a moment before knocking 3 times with her delicate hand, the sound echoing through the tranquil surroundings. Through the peephole, a pair of curious eyes could be seen before the door creaked open. As we stepped in, our eyes were met with a breathtaking sight, a grand entrance hall that seemed to belong in another era. The opulent furnishings and decor evoked images from 19th century period films, exuding an air of antiquity and grandeur. A surreal atmosphere seemed to envelop us, as if we had been transported through time. But what caught my attention most was the figure standing at the foot of a magnificent staircase. He towered over us, dressed in a striking red robe, and wearing a haunting mask that sent shivers down my spine.
Welcome. I am the master of this castle. They call me the monk. It is an honor to have you here,
he said in a deep, commanding voice. Before I could even introduce myself, Dalia spoke up.
We are here for the game,
she said confidently. The monk gestured for us to follow him up the stairs. As we ascended, I couldn't help but admire the intricate artwork adorning the walls and ceiling. Each step felt like we were stepping further back in time. We reached a large chamber at the top of the stairs, with a long table set for 2 in the center. The master guided us to our seats before taking his own place at the head of the table.
I trust you are both ready for tonight's game,
he asked with intrigue in his voice. Dalia nodded eagerly while I couldn't help but laugh, thinking at some sadomasochistic stuff.
Excellent.
He began speaking, his words meant to soothe and comfort me.
Dalia has told me so much about you. I truly believe I can help you find the peace and tranquility you've been searching for.
But despite his calming tone, there was something unsettling about him. What was I doing here? In front of this man who looked like a sinister cult leader in his haunting castle hidden in the middle of nowhere. I glanced at Dalia, searching for reassurance, but she simply watched me with a satisfied smirk. Maybe it's best if we go somewhere else, I choked out.
Oh, don't be afraid of him. I wanted you to meet him because he helped me find peace and happiness. You need that too, don't you?
Dalia scoffed. My mind was racing as I tried to make sense of everything. Was I really desperate enough to trust this man and his promises of change? But then again, if it worked for Dalia... The air was thick with a surreal aura, and I couldn't shake off the sense that something malevolent lurked just beyond my line of sight.
Your fears are merely constructs of your own mind. Dalia has found solace here, and so can you,
he stated calmly. Dalia seemed entranced by this mysterious figure, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was not right. I wanted to run away, but at the same time, curiosity pulled me closer. But what exactly do you want from me? I finally managed to ask. Dalia's fervent nodding was almost hypnotic, her eyes gleaming with an intense determination that both reassured and unnerved me. The room seemed to vibrate with conflicting energies, like a crucible ready to explode.
I want nothing more than to guide you towards true enlightenment. But the path to peace is not easy, my child. It will test your beliefs and push you to your limits. Are you ready for the journey?
Even behind the mask, I could feel his piercing gaze bore into me, as if trying to read my deepest thoughts. But I refused to let him see any doubt or skepticism in my expression.
Sometimes the answers we seek lie in the most unexpected places. Embrace the unknown, and you may find what you've been searching for all along.
He continued, his voice growing stronger and more persuasive. As he spoke, my eyes were drawn to the unsettling statue silently standing in the corner of the room. Its mesmerizing presence seemed to radiate a supernatural energy, with intricate details that made it appear almost lifelike. The flickering candlelight danced across its features, casting phantom-like shadows and adding to the surreal atmosphere that hung in the air like a thick fog. Every line and curve of the statue seemed to hold secrets and stories, as if it was beckoning me to come closer and uncover its mysteries. The monk's steps were measured and purposeful as he approached the statue, sensing that I had noticed something unusual about it. His fingers ran over a strange metallic skull in his hands, almost reverently. Then he began to speak of his so-called projects. He delved into details of esoteric studies, ancient rituals, and the pursuit of a higher understanding of existence. As he spoke, I felt a curious mix of fascination and apprehension wash over me. The alluring pull of his words seemed to overpower any logical concerns I may have had. It was like being caught in a spell, unable to resist the monk's charismatic aura and enigmatic teachings. Dalia's hands glided over my skin, igniting a fiery desire within me. Each caress felt like a promise of ecstasy, tempting me to give in to the monk's captivating charm. Despite my growing unease, I couldn't help but crave more of Dalia's intoxicating touch. It was a dangerous game we played, but one I couldn't resist.
Do it for me.
Dalia's voice was a seductive hiss in my ear, her tongue flicking out to tease the sensitive skin. Despite my doubts, I found myself unable to resist her command. There was something irresistible about the mysterious game she had concocted. My curiosity burned within me, pushing me to uncover its secrets. So I nodded my head, and the monk and Dalia shared a sinister glance before the monk placed the metal skull near the grotesque statue and motioned for us to follow him. My heart raced with fear and anticipation as the monk led me through a maze of winding corridors in the old dark castle. Despite Dalia's attempts to reassure me, there was an undeniable tension in the air that made my stomach churn. As we descended deeper into the basement, I couldn't shake the feeling that something malevolent lurked in the shadows, waiting to pounce. The musty smell of age and decay permeated the air, adding to the ominous atmosphere. It was like walking into a nightmare come to life. The long and narrow hallway seemed to stretch on forever. Each step we took echoed loudly, creating a gloomy atmosphere. Finally, we reached the end where a tall door stood, its rusted handle beckoning us inside. As it creaked open, a deafening silence greeted us, before a dense red light flooded the room. Hooded figures stood motionless around a central altar, their faces hidden in shadow so deep it seemed to swallow them whole. The scene was like the haunting nightmare from the previous night, sending icy shivers down my spine and making me question if I was still dreaming. The monk's hand sliced through the air, his voice dropping to a low, menacing whisper that seemed to slice through the silence like a razor.
Behold the path to enlightenment, my child.
Dalia's grip on my arm became almost painful, her voice still soothing but tinged with a desperate edge.
You must trust in the monk. He alone can guide you towards the light and save your soul.
Her eyes burned with intensity, and I knew I had no choice but to follow the monk's guidance. My eyes were transfixed on the ominous stone altar in the center of the room. A woman lay bound upon it, her eyes wide with terror. It was as if I were staring into my own worst nightmare. The air grew heavy and oppressive, charged with an unsettling energy that made my skin crawl. Hooded figures surrounded the altar, their low chants echoing through the chamber in a foreign tongue. A sense of dread consumed me, freezing me in place. What is this? What unholy ritual is taking place? I managed to stammer, my voice barely above a whisper in the spooky stillness of the room. The monk turned to me, sending shivers down my spine.
This is a sacred journey, a transcendence of the mundane. To reach enlightenment, sacrifices must be made.
As the ritual continued, a knot of fear tightened in my stomach. Dalia's whispers became more insistent, urging me to embrace this strange ceremony as a gateway to understanding. Reality melted away into a nightmare, and I was seized by a sickening mix of curiosity and terror. This was not a holy ceremony, but a descent into madness and evil. Part of me yearned to join in on this mysterious journey towards enlightenment, while the other part was filled with doubt and hesitation. Was I truly ready for what lay ahead? Would this bring me closer to my desires, or lead me down a path of destruction? The conflicting emotions weighed heavily on my mind as I struggled to make a decision that could change my life forever. Dalia's black hood and coat seemed to blend into the shadows, her presence ominous and foreboding. She stood out among the others, her aura pulsating with raw power. There was no doubt she was the main sorceress, the one to be feared and revered. My heart raced as she handed me a knife, its weight heavy in my shaking hand. Standing next to the sacrificial altar, I could feel the weight of centuries of bloodshed and dark rituals pressing down on me. Dalia's voice rang in my ears, both soothing and intoxicating, urging me forward.
Do it! Do it for me! Do it for yourself. Through this sacrificial offering, your life will truly shine.
She commanded with a seductive smile. And I knew in that moment, as the blade glinted in the dim light, that there was no turning back from this dark pact I had made with Dalia. The sinister chants of the hooded figures grew into a deafening crescendo, reverberating off the stone walls of the dimly lit chamber. Their words slithered like snakes, weaving into the monk's hypnotic presence, compelling me to succumb to the dark ritual before me. My mind is consumed by their insidious rhythm, urging me to embrace the unspeakable act that awaits. The girl on the altar shook violently, her eyes a mixture of terror and acceptance as she awaited her fate. I felt my stomach churn with disgust at the grisly scene, but an inexplicable pull kept me rooted to the spot. In a state of trance, I lifted the knife and slashed it into the skin, releasing a coppery scent that filled the air. Blood poured out in a crimson stream, pooling around the sacrificial altar as the hooded figures intensified their chants, their movements becoming frenzied. My heart raced as I realized I was now part of this dark ritual. The monk, a ghostly figure lurking in the shadows, observed with a twisted sense of pleasure.
Through death, one can embrace eternal life.
He hissed, his voice slicing through the chaos. The room pulsed with a palpable malevolence, and I could taste both terror and ecstasy on my tongue. The cloaked figures descended upon the spilled blood with an insatiable hunger, devouring it in a frenzied and ritualistic feast. The air in the ceremonial chamber grew heavy with an otherworldly presence, and the boundaries between reality and nightmare blurred until I could no longer distinguish between the two. As the twisted rite came to an end, a macabre transformation began to unfold. The air crackled with a malevolent energy, and the line between life and death blurred into a grotesque dance of shadows. As I stood there, both witness and unwilling participant in this vile ceremony, a sickening realization hit me. I had sealed my fate by choosing to be here. This was far beyond anything I could have imagined, and I knew that the consequences of my choices would haunt me forever. At this point, Dalia led me away from the unsettling ritual. We sought refuge in a near room, and as we were finally alone, the tension that had built up seemed to twist into an all-consuming desire. With a fierce hunger, Dalia shed her sorceress vest, baring her naked body in front of me. Her eyes gleamed with pride as she whispered seductively, inviting me to join her in this twisted game of power and pleasure. And as the sounds of our frenzied lovemaking echoed through the room, I couldn't help but wonder if this was just another part of her dark magic, or if it was my own desires. Our bodies were entwined in a passionate embrace, but a nagging suspicion gnawed at the back of my mind. It felt like someone or something was watching us, judging every move we made. Was it the monk, the mysterious hooded figures that roamed these halls, or some other nameless entity? Dalia's sweet words and declarations of love only added to my inner turmoil. As much as I wanted to believe in our love, and as we continued our lascivious union, I couldn't help but wonder if our choices were part of a larger, sinister scheme. The next day, Dalia called a cab for me. It was the same driver as last night, and he gave me a sly wink. On the way home, I was overwhelmed with guilt. The memories of the horrific night haunted me. The realization that I had taken a life weighed on me like an insurmountable burden, and the possibility of becoming the next victim threatened my sanity. It dawned on me that I had gotten caught up in a sinister web that would lead to my demise. I got back to my place and saw a missed call from Detective Robinson. He was the tall policeman from the club last night. He told me he's investigating on the girl who was found dead without any blood in her body, and thinks that the club might be involved in recruiting victims. He said he's talking to everyone who goes there. The mere mention of going to the police filled me with dread. On one hand, I wanted justice for what had happened, but on the other, I feared for my own safety. Would speaking up only make things worse? My mind raced with all the possible outcomes, each one more terrifying than the last. I was torn between seeking justice and protecting myself. The decision felt impossible to make. I'm writing this down, but I'll probably get rid of it after hooking up with Dalia and taking out another girl. Something weird happened to me last night. Maybe I'm turning into evil like the monk. Maybe I deserve to die for what I did. But just in case things go wrong, I hope someone will understand how serious this is. My story is my only way to ask for help, a desperate shout for people to know about the scary stuff going on in this castle. But honestly, I'm scared that no one will believe me. Will anyone actually listen? Right now, I'm super scared that I won't make it out alive. Every creak and shadow makes me jump, and my heart beats so fast it might burst out of my chest. It's like someone's watching me, but I can't see them. But they've sent me home twice before, so maybe there's a reason for everything. At least that's what I really want to believe. If I were to suddenly stop writing this testimony, it would be a sign that the darkness had consumed me entirely and I'm gone for good. But I still have a tiny bit of hope left. Maybe someone else can figure out how to stop the monster castle and save us all. Or maybe I hope all this story remains a secret. Do you like secrets? Dalia asked me yesterday. Fuck yeah, I do. They make me think of her, my beloved one. Now enough with this shit. I'm getting bored and I can't wait to see Dalia again.